And then, guys, can we get on to a couple questions? We've got some lovely audience members who've sent in some questions. And I think this one here is probably quite good for this podcast because the question is from James Reeve. Thank you for your question. And for anyone listening at home, if you want us to answer anything in detail, in thorough detail, feel free to drop a comment on the YouTube channel or on any other platform with our @GroundUpPod at name. But ideally, the YouTube channel, we can pick them up easy and we will go in deep on those questions. And the more detail you give us, the more we can help out. So James Reeve has asked, great episode. I'd love to hear more about your process for commercial to residential conversions. James is doing one and wants some tips and advice on what to look for. So James, that's quite a vague question because there's so many ways you could skin that cat, but maybe we could each do a quick 101. Maybe a quick 101 on commercial to resi conversions, starting blank canvas. What are the steps? What are the things to look out for? Starting with Stu?
Yeah, mate. Definitely, I like to buy in prime locations because it's going to attract the most amount of commercial interest on the ground floor unit. I've really changed my strategy now to anchor in a really strong commercial tenant on the ground floor that will stabilize and secure the asset. I like to buy near train stations just because obviously there is minimum amount of parking on these sites. So bus stops, train stations, local town and amenities to use, and really try and go 2-3 floors high. I mean, you've got Class G where you can put 2 units above most commercial units, even I think they're in A and OBs as well, and certainly conservation areas, or Class MA where you can squeeze as many items in. And the reason I like to try and stay below sort of 3 units above ground, which is effectively floors from the ground floor, is it's a lot easier with the 18-meter rule and working at heights and secondary staircases, sprinklers. You can obviously introduce lobbies and use the space that's there, as long as you take it into account when you're working out your space planning, to get as many units on those floors above as possible. And it's just a generally easier site. And then the next thing I would look for is the building type. So you've got Victorian units, which obviously come with more risk and more pain, but generally a better looking asset that's lasted 200 years, and it will have definitely that curb appeal for people who want to rent either the commercial unit or the flats above. Or the bank we're doing at the moment is a 1970s concrete ring beam block, which is a lot more cost effective to build. I'm really excited to get to the end of that one so I can sort of do a price analysis on the Victorian units and the newer build blocks, because just simply the fire regulations, the sound, everything's a lot easier in a concrete ring beam construction. So we're just taking all this knowledge and we're trying to work out what is the best commercial to resi type. And I think looking at the numbers at the moment, that the 1970s, 3 floors above ground, next to or in a town centre or near train stations will be effectively what I'm out there in the market looking to buy.
Nice. Ronan, what would you say? Commercial to resi apartments 101.
For buildings, just keep it long and skinny is the kind of rule of thumb. Natural light is a big item for conversions, especially if some people are trying to buy a big square block, just doesn't work. So know your field. But as touched on, I'd be one for kind of keeping some of the retail on the ground floor. I think it's a great way of maximizing your value if you can get away with it. And if you can make something that works in that area. So that would be my 2 simple rule of thumbs there.
And Jack?
Good. I mean, there's some key points have already been mentioned, and as you said, Rye, this we could probably talk for about 10 hours on this between us. We always try and get the prior approval consent for something before exchange to help with funding. Don't base your build costs on a square footage or square meterage, because each unit should come with a bit of a cost to itself. So what I mean by that is you could have 10 37 meter square flats, or you can have 10 2-bed flats, and the pound per square foot rate is going to be completely different for those two, because you've got more density in another. So pound per square foot rates don't work the same necessarily as they do on new builds. So we work both on a pound per square foot, but also on a unit rate. As well as talking about build costs, make sure that you analyze things like windows. A lot of people discredit new windows going in with a change of use. Services and mechanical engineering can be super expensive because you're obviously manipulating an existing building for a new use. Think about externals and design. in that too, and sort of looking at ceiling heights, raised access flooring, whether you need diamond core drilling, where the services are going in the building, has it already got a riser? All of those things can either make or break a deal if you don't have your numbers dialed down, especially at scale. Ronan's already mentioned it. Your gross development values are going to be compromised against a new build block of flats because you're repurposing something. You haven't got the same lighting. You might have to actually work pretty heavy with a deep footplate and see how you can manipulate the building to be more complementary for light. Also, it was probably an office or something else, so the landscaping and the externals is going to feel like that. So have a budget in for softening the approach, maybe putting in some features on the building to make it feel a lot more residential and the surrounding area. Speed is a big one for us. So when you're, like Ronan mentioned, he's building his blocks out at the same rate of sales rate. So every time he can sell a block of flats, he's building them out, and he's strategically moving around the site so that he can sell the units as he's building them out. When you buy a commercial building, you can't part finish it. You've got to basically knock it out. You can build show flats and you can try and sell off plan. But in a market, in certain areas, you kind of need a finished product in some instances, especially if you're selling to locals and not overseas. So I'd highly recommend that you think about the speed and the timeframes that you've got to deliver the stock at, and also bringing that amount of stock to that market is a key. Last but not least, Stuart mentioned location. A lot of these buildings work really well because there's not new real estate going up in town centres and in good locations. So use it to your advantage. If you're repurposing an existing building in an existing place, make sure it is in a good location, because you may find, which we've got with we bought a 17,000 square foot office building we're converting to residential flats. There isn't a comparable for a converted building because no other conversions have happened in the town. It's all happened a couple of miles away because that's the nature of the building. So use that to slightly your competitive advantage, because you will be compromised on design repurposing that. But I hope that was useful. I mean, we could go on forever, couldn't we?
Yeah, we could go on for a while. And the boys have touched on a lot of relevant points there. The only thing I'd say that if you're starting to do commercials resis, don't do what's considered a large scheme, which is 15 units or more in the UK, because then it's by default going to go to committee. And also you just start to tie yourselves in all kinds of different compliance and challenges and the sheer cost of borrowing and other things. When it's a new model for you, it's not a good idea. So I'd say 5 to 10 apartments is what you want to look at. Ideally, relatively light touch. If you can get Class MA, PD, office to resi, then that's probably a better way to do it. How can you de-risk your entry point and wet the palette with a commercial to resi, but without diving straight into something where you might see this great building that in principle works, but if you've not been through the ring of that conversion before, Jack picked up on a few things then, like your risers, your incoming feeds, and just the external envelope of the building. Is it cladded? What's the cavity like? There's so much that goes into retrofits. They're way harder than new builds in some aspects, which is contrary to what the layman person would think, where, well, you've got an existing building, surely it's easier than a new build. No. It's like much, much harder. It's the complete opposite. A new build is, imagine it's a blank canvas, and whatever's drawn on the floor plans by the architect is pretty much what you get to build. It's only in the ground where you've got uncertainties. Whereas with a conversion, if it's not fully stripped out when you buy it, then you don't know what's behind some of those walls. You don't know what the build up is. There might be some subsidence that you might have to, your M&E runs could be all over the place. There could be steel beams and other things to work through. A lot of practical implications that can make your prediction on what you think the cost will be and what you think the delivery will be, and they just completely obliterate them at some point in the project. So start small, 5 to 10 units. Daylight, you want to look at the building and go, can that be a residential building? Can you really see that being apartments? Sometimes that's all it really needs, is you just look at it and go, can that really be apartments, or am I trying to make something work that's never really going to work?
Or would you live there? Or
Yeah,
would you live there? That's the way I analyze it.
When you're doing those jobs, I presume all the time you're just assuming you're going straight back to brick.
Yeah,
always.
Yeah. You're not retaining anything.
There's so many unknowns. You just have to assume you're ripping the whole thing out. And then if you're going up certain floors, you have to consider, is there an elevator required for residential units? So that's another big item.
I would also consider we've actually started just putting elevators in anyway because it helps sell them.
Yeah, but Henry can afford elevators, mate. There's other areas out there that's like 3 or 4 floors high. In fact, I purposely try and build under 4 floors because, again, would I live there and would I want to run all my shopping up, or would I have put audio visual entry systems so the Amazon guy can run my shopping up for me or whatever. But yeah, I don't really want to get involved with elevators too much because it's 120 grand for one that's going to break and it's going to cause you more of an asset management issue over time from use than it would be worth putting one in.
Once it's sold, I don't care.
Yeah, that's the difference. I hold, and I've got the headache long term, so I'd rather not have the problem.
And the reason you're putting for senior living, I'm assuming, JJ.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of our buyers are what we call downsizers. So they're living in a multi-million-pound house, selling up because kids have fled. They're 60, 65 years old. They're thinking about how they're going to get to that flat on the top floor. So it's just to give us the best exit options, as a contingency. My view is actually, and we have this rule for quite a few things, rather than building a list of positives, build a list of negatives and try and cross every single one of them out. And that's the best way we come to finish our schemes and from a design and delivery perspective.
Are you putting a lift in Tame?
Yeah.
You are putting a lift in because that's quite a wide, long building as well. So you must be putting a few lifts in. Then if you're going to do one.
Yeah. So I think there's only 6 flats that don't benefit from lift access out of 20.
Wow.
Nice.
What's your cost of lift? About 60 grand all in?
30 yeah, a rule of thumb is I think it's 30k plus 10 grand a floor.
Yeah.
30k 10 grand a floor.